Xi Jinping is gradually dismantling Zhang Yuxia's faction. Recently, the frequent high-profile appearances of Zhang Yuxia, the first vice chairman of the CPC Central Military Commission, and his delicate relationship with CPC leader Xi Jinping have attracted attention from all sides. Some analysts believe that Zhang's direct line and subordinates in the military have been dismissed, which is actually a slap in the face for Zhang. Some analysts have also pointed out that Xi must have a lot of leverage over Zhang. However, Xi has to rely on Zhang to preside over the overall situation, so the two forces in the military may have temporarily reached a certain balance of terror. On August 29th, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Zhang Yuxia in Beijing. On September 7th, the special seminar for senior cadres of the CPC's entire army to study the spirit of the Central Military Commission's political work conference concluded, and Zhang Yuxia attended and spoke. On the 10th, the award ceremony for the CPC Shenzhou 16 and Shenzhou 17 astronauts was held in Beijing, and Zhang Yuxia represented Xi and the Central Military Commission. From September 11th to 13th, the Innovation Seminar on Combat Command Teaching Models of Chinese Military Academies was held at the National Defense University, where Zhang Yuxia attended and delivered a speech. From September 12th to 14th, the annual Shangshan Forum was held in Beijing. Zhang Yuxia and Vice Chairman of the Military Commission, He Weidong, met with foreign participants separately. On September 17th, senior media person Yeta Akio wrote on the Overseas X platform that, on the surface, the forum was hosted by the Chinese Military Science Society, but in fact, the Chinese military was behind it. Unlike previous years, this year, neither the speech of Defense Minister Dong Jun nor the speeches of officials at all levels of the Chinese Communist Party directly mentioned the Taiwan issue. The article pointed out that, at the same time, the attitude of the Chinese Communist Party's military towards the United States has also softened. Yaita believes that because the U.S. presidential election has intensified, the two presidential candidates have accused each other of being too weak on the Chinese Communist Party. Therefore, the Chinese military deliberately keeps a low profile and does not want to provoke the United States. The article also highlighted that Zhang Yuxia had a significant presence at this forum. In the past, the Shangshan Forum was always the stage for the Chinese defense minister. Last year, Zhang Yuxia acted as a proxy for Li Shangfu, who was placed under double supervision. This year, although Defense Minister Dong Jun also attended, he still does not hold the title of state counselor. Now he is a head shorter than everyone he meets. In comparison, Zhang Yuxia appears much stronger. Yaita Akio pointed out that the relationship between Zhang Yuxia and Xi Jinping is more nuanced. Initially, the two were in a cooperative relationship, but later, Xi's anti-corruption campaign in the military has weakened Zhang's power. For example, Li Shangfu was promoted by Zhang Yuxia, and when Li Shangfu fell, Zhang Yuxia naturally lost face. The article suggests that if Li Shangfu is guilty of embezzlement, then Zhang Yuxia, Li's predecessor in the Equipment Development Department, might also be implicated. Xi Jinping likely has considerable evidence against Zhang Yuxia. Recently, the military has faced challenges, with two defense ministers being removed. Xi needs Zhang Yuxia to oversee the situation. Although they are not fully aligned, they may have reached a certain balance of power. Since last year, the Chinese Communist Army's Rocket Force, Equipment Development Department, Military Commission Joint Staff Department, and other military branches and military-industrial enterprises have been purged, with at least more than a dozen senior officials removed. Among them were two former commanders of the Rocket Force, Li Yuchao and Zhou Yaning, and former defense ministers Li Shangfu and Wei Fenghe. Zhang Yuxia was in charge of the Equipment Development Department of the Chinese Communist Party, which also includes the Rocket Force and the Strategic Support Force. Many of the senior generals who are currently in trouble were his subordinates. On September 13th, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress of the Communist Party of China announced the removal of Deng Zhiping from his position as a representative of the National People's Congress. On the same day, the official report stated that Deng Zhiping, former deputy commander of the army, was removed from his position as a representative of the 14th National People's Congress at the Military People's Congress on June 6, for suspected serious violations of discipline and law. Independent commentator Kai Shenkun previously wrote that the biggest possibility for Deng Xiaoping's investigation for suspected serious violations of discipline and law is that Deng was not absolutely loyal to Xi and was involved in a series of equipment corruption cases in the military, which are actually closely related to Zhang Yuxia. Kai Shenkin analyzed on his YouTube channel on September 20th that Zhang Yuxia has become the subject of various rumors this year, and it is evident that Zhang is being put on the spot. There is speculation that Zhang Yuxia is dissatisfied with Xi's endless purges and, with the support of the second generation of Reds and the veterans, he is actively challenging Xi's authority and attempting to weaken Xi's control over the military. Kai Shenkun noted that Zhang Yuxia's direct line and subordinates in the military have been dismissed one after another, and this process shows no signs of stopping, especially with Xi's large-scale purging of Rocket Army generals and senior officials of the National Defense Aerospace Military-Industrial Complex since last year. On the surface, it seems aimed at Li Shangfu and Wei Fenghe, but it is actually a slap in Zhang's face. In other words, Xi will not avoid targeting Zhang Yuxia due to old ties, but will continue cutting off Zhang's supporters, leaving Zhang as a commander without significant forces, thus posing no threat to Xi's power. Kai Shenkin pointed out that Xi Jinping relied on Zhang Yuxia to counter the Zhang and Hu factions in the military, and now Xi has turned to deal with Zhang. At this time, to protect himself, Zhang has to rely on the second generation of Reds and the old faction to build momentum and maintain his voice and influence in the military, while also balancing against the Fujian clique, including He Weidong and Miao Hua, whom Xi relies on. As a result, the military now has two factions, maintaining a terrifying balance between each other. Programmer Zhang Heng arrived at the Huanyu building in Phase 1 of Zhongguancun Software Park as usual. This is the location of IBM's Software R&D Center. Early Saturday morning, Zhang Heng received an email from IBM headquarters addressed to all employees. The day before, his and his colleagues' intranet access had been revoked. The email notified them of an online meeting scheduled for Monday. It was the longest weekend Zhang Heng had ever experienced. The meeting started on time that morning. IBM's Vice President of Global Enterprise System Development spoke first, saying it had been a very difficult decision, but the development tasks in China would be transferred to other overseas bases. Immediately afterward, the general manager in charge of IBM Zed and Linux One and the Vice President of Storage Engineering also spoke. The three executives concluded the meeting in less than 3 minutes. In a few short sentences, the fate of IBM's China R&D Center was sealed. Thousands of employees across Beijing, Shanghai, and Dalian, including those from the China Development Laboratory, CDL, and the China Systems Laboratory, CLS, lost their jobs overnight. From that point on, IBM only maintained consulting, sales, and technical support operations in China. Within the next 2 days, Zhang Heng received his severance package. There was a 2-month buffer period, compensation of N+3, and the year-end bonus to be paid out the following year. The process moved so quickly that Zhang Heng barely had time to react. It felt like being dumped by a heartless partner, gradually disintegrating, collapsing in an instant. Hemingway's novel The Sun Also Rises describes a businessman in a desperate situation. Zhang Heng also felt his company disintegrating and crumbling in the same way. It turns out that real departures always happen quietly. IBM's research center in Beijing was established in September 1995. At that time, IBM was the first multinational IT company to set up a research and development institution in China. Soon after, other companies like Intel followed suit. That same year, Huawei established a research institute in Beijing, focusing on the newly emerging field of data communication. When IBM entered China, it was actually going through a financial crisis. Years of losses had piled up, totaling more than $16 billion. Lou Gerstner, the CEO at the time, tried various approaches and began implementing a series of reform strategies. By 1997, IBM had returned to profitability. On Christmas Eve that year, Ren Zhengfei visited many IT giants, including IBM. Unlike other companies, IBM did not treat Ren with suspicion. Instead, they spent a whole day explaining project management to him. It was this open attitude that won IBM its first management consulting business in China. They quickly put together a plan and sent 70 consultants to Huawei. Depending on their level, the consultants earned $300, $500, or $680 per hour. In 1998, Huawei's total sales were only 8.9 billion yuan. Nevertheless, Huawei agreed without hesitation. Ren Zhengfei said that the reform assistance IBM provided was like a pair of American shoes. Even if the heels were cut off, they still had to be worn. The prescription IBM gave to Huawei was called Integrated Product Development, IPD. Before the reform, Huawei's R&D departments were independent and fragmented. Afterward, R&D became a market-driven process. At the time, Huawei already had 20,000 employees, but due to the tough reforms, 30% of the staff in the chip R&D department alone left. When IPD was introduced, Huawei had already invested 2 years in 3G R&D. Back then, 2G was still the mainstream, and developing 3G was an uncertain venture. But IPD turned that venture into a clearly structured process. We all know what happened next. It was 3G that pushed Huawei to new heights. By June 2003, IBM consultants had left Huawei's R&D building in Bantian, Shenzhen. By then, IPD thinking had become deeply ingrained in Huawei's operations. A team of internal process experts trained by Huawei was ready to take over from the IBM consultants. When people looked at IPD again, it was 2021. In the wave of new car manufacturing, Li Auto was the first car company to announce it would fully adopt Huawei's IPD approach. More than 20 years ago, Huawei required its executives to read The Power of Pace. This was the exact book that IBM executives had given to Ren Zhengfei. More than 20 years later, many of the books on Li Xiang's reading list for executives are related to Huawei's IPD. One of the important research products of IBM's China Research Institute was Watson. Watson is the precursor to large language models. It was developed 5 years before AlphaGo defeated Go champion Lee Sedol and 11 years before ChatGPT. IBM actually took only 4 years to develop Watson. At that time, there were a total of 30 researchers worldwide participating in the project. In addition to the United States, Japan, and Israel, China was also involved. Until it was shut down in 2021, Watson remained the flagship product of the China Research Institute, and it did experience a period of commercial success in China. IBM first ventured into the field of clinical applications for cancer treatment. IBM commissioned a consulting company to conduct a survey at the time, and they found that in some areas of Northeast China, doctors' treatment plans for cancer patients aligned with standard guidelines. However, building a hospital information system is extremely expensive. For high-end private hospitals, the cost may reach hundreds of millions of dollars. Additionally, doctors' interests were deeply tied to pharmaceutical companies, and the introduction of Watson would undoubtedly disrupt these relationships. Even in the face of these challenges, Watson entered the market in 2016. By analyzing 300 medical journals, over 200 textbooks, and nearly 15 million pages of text, Watson was able to assist oncologists in formulating treatment plans. By 2018, Watson's medical system had spread to nearly 80 hospitals in 22 provinces and 43 cities in China. Sales revenue from the Greater China region accounted for half of Watson Medical's global quarterly revenue. The digitalization of China's banking industry started with IBM. In the 1980s, the People's Bank of China launched the YBS Bank Insurance System project, and a key part of this was the introduction of the IBM 360 system. The digitalization of 13 Chinese banks in Hong Kong was also facilitated by IBM. In 1987, IBM's customized Safe2 system for ICBC was rolled out on a large scale. Soon, the Bank of China and China Construction Bank followed suit. At that time, most banks still operated manually, keeping accounts by hand. IBM began with banks, and as its business expanded, it leveraged its customer base and servers to sell software and services, becoming a dominant force. However, this honeymoon period didn't last long. For well-known reasons, the banking industry began phasing out the IOE system starting in 2013.